My name is Brian. This is Bare Metal, a channel where your one buddy from college who you talk to once a month finally calls you and tells you about some weird stuff he found on the internet to shock your otherwise indescribable friendship back into existence like a defibrillator. How you been, man? Today, we're going to be exploring minimalist role-playing games with dark, eerie, or spooky undertones. I was largely inspired to put this list together by my previous forays into games like Demon Lord Reincarnation and The Eternal Castle, both of which I think show that a little restraint by a dev can take the player a long way, and that you don't necessarily need huge worlds with flashy graphics or complicated mechanics to get the job done. Now, I realize that the term minimalist has a lot of potential applications and meanings when it comes to the many different facets of video game experience, so I want to set some expectations before we start. When I say that, I don't just mean pixel art games, because that doesn't necessarily entail minimalism. Just look at games like Hyper Light Drifter and Noida. They have these rich worlds that are insanely detailed and look painstakingly put together. And if you tried to tell me that they were minimalist, I'd tell you, hey, I think your grip on reality is slipping away and I feel unsafe around you. Please get away from me. I'm also not just going to throw every RPG or DRPG in here because they use the WASD keys and maybe sometimes the mouse. No, I'd be here for 10 hours. No, we're not doing that. And finally, a lot of you edgelords are also going to be disappointed that my definition of dark or eerie does not always necessitate raw gore.
Question! My character!
You need to leave!
Get over yourselves. Not everything needs to be grotesque to create an atmosphere, and if we're talking minimalism, the implication is that you don't need to show everything to get the point across anyway. Instead, this video is going to focus on the different ways some of the most interesting indie devs I've come across have done a lot with just a little to craft a compelling RPG experience and a specific mood. One last housekeeping note, I found some of these games on itch, but I played them all via Steam. In either case, it may not be possible to do either soon, and you should try them out ASAP before some nosy-ass payment processor decides it's all too unpalatable for them to allow you to spend your own hard-earned money on. Let's get into it. Breed in Darkness is a dungeon crawler demo by Rescue Party Interactive that came to Steam in February of 2025. In this story, you play a villager who has come of age and must now complete the same rite of passage tasked to the others who came before you. You walk out into the wilderness toward a structure that many have never returned from. And you step inside a dungeon. When you turn back to look at the guard who let you in, all you see is a pair of eyes through a slot in the door. He tells you to go down into the dungeon and not to come back until you gather 10,000 gold coins. There's almost a sense of urgency behind how little he's saying to you, but any attempts to talk to him further get you nowhere. He has his mission, and you have yours. Thankfully, the villagers haven't sent you down empty-handed. They were kind enough to provide you with an outline of this dungeon as well as a compass to help you navigate. It's not as good as a map. You'll have to make one out of these as you go. But it's better than nothing. Without any other recourse, you accept your fate and step into the darkness with nothing in hand but a torch. Almost immediately, you encounter an ominous figure standing in the recesses of the next room. An executioner, hood on head and axe in hand, ready to cut you down the moment he sees you. So, unarmed and outmatched, your only way to deal with him when you start will be to stay unseen. You put out your torch and walk right up to him, hoping that his other senses don't betray your presence. You slip past him and, not long after, come across a locked door marked with occult symbols. You'll have to find the key to this, which doesn't take long. but it foreshadows the kind of work you'll have to do in the halls ahead. Within the newly opened chamber lies a safe room with a bed, a shop, and an armory. In this last room, you find a short sword jutting from the wall. And now having a means of defending yourself, you double back through the corridor with the executioner. You parry the attacks you can, perhaps taking a few blows in the process, and ultimately strike him down. In the room he guards, there's a note. It reads, "Watch out for the fool. It will alert its master to your presence. Kill it while you have the chance." Past this, you find your first bit of gold on the floor, though it is a mere drop in the bucket. You'll have to acquire a great deal more before you can leave. But there's also a door in this room, one that looks to be ornate, ominous, and high security. It seems you'll need multiple keys to unlock it, and considering how tightly guarded it is, you have a feeling that the treasure you need to buy your freedom is within. 2 of the keys are in the northern section of the dungeon, where the light grows cold and pale. You'll find them past more executioners and spinning chambers, whose levers are hidden in other rooms. In one dead end, a portrait of horde-looking gluttonous royals hangs on the wall. One of them looks as though his eyes and lips have been eaten away by something or someone else. You follow some clues around the dungeon, looking for a solution in a set of riddles hidden away in various nooks, and that's when you hear it. A bell. Following the sound, you see the fool for the first time. He's already on the move. He's running back to his master, and you try to strike him down, but he's too quick. By the time the game tells you it's too late, the panic has already set in. You need to leave immediately. It's time to run, to make it back to the safe room. Whoever the fool's master is very powerful and very angry, and he's here. You wake up in the safe room, and while all of your gold is now gone, you still have the knowledge of what to do and where to go. You travel back through the dungeon, avoiding the executioners and the fool. You solve the puzzles, and when you finally collect all of the keys, you make your way back to the door. Stepping into the chamber, you see it. All the gold you need and more, all tucked beneath the corpse of a giant. You fill your bag. It doesn't take long to get what you came for, and you easily slip out of the chamber unnoticed. But the thought strikes you. There was so much in there. You could go back and take more, couldn't you? So you do. You push your luck just a little bit more. This demo is awesome. It gets its instructions, mood, and message across so simply, so effectively, and you can tell just how much it takes the best parts of RPGs and survival horror games, and whittles it all down to what we enjoy most about those things without sacrificing anything. The art style is particularly interesting to me, because it does use a vibrant and almost cartoony style, but it does so without managing to lose that sense of dread and grit that it wants to convey. Combat is simple enough to pick up, but a challenge to master, and I think, given a few more mechanics and options, it could come out to be something really solid and interesting. As of right now, it feels like more of a distraction and an annoyance. Everything else about this game, I think, is really good. The unique look, the no-frills combat, the unsettling sound design, it all makes for a fantastic lights-off dungeon crawling experience. I hope they continue building this up or pursuing other projects with a similar theme. This definitely walks the walk, even as a demo. Try it out when you get a chance and let me know what you think.
This world is a vast, ever-shifting labyrinth of shadows. How did it come to be? No one truly knows. Some whisper it was forged in battle. Others believe it has always lingered here, an eternal nightmare. Like rats, we crawl on the bones of long-dead civilizations. Each of us singing a fragile song, desperate for it not to fade too soon. But maybe you will be the one whose song finally endures.
This is how your campaign in Songs of Rats will open. The mood is immediately set in a way that perfectly introduces you to the style, the stakes, and the world you're going to be stepping into. Songs of Rats is essentially a choose-your-own adventure book, a playable post-apocalyptic sci-fi narrative. It specifically names those kinds of second-person adventure novels as primary inspiration, but it also glows with the influence of video games that came before it, like Fallout 1 and 2. Songs of Rats takes place aboard the Wreckage, a massive cluster of self-repairing spaceships and stations which collided and fused together after a massive multi-faction space battle. What resulted is a self-consuming labyrinth, a massive would-be world consisting of humans, mutants, robots, and other threats entirely. It's not exactly a visual novel, but there is a big emphasis on the art component that is meant to go along with the story, something I'll touch on later. Because the story is the main course of Songs of Rats. It's what you're primarily meant to focus on, and what you get complete autonomy over from the moment you boot up the game. There are 2 campaigns in the game as it currently exists. You have one that is more suited for an introductory good faith survival experience. A hero going out into the wild reaches of this derelict ship to save his community from plague and starvation. But there's also a second one that depicts your character as a ruthless, dog-eat-dog survivor willing to cut down anyone to get ahead. I think that story is very telling, so here is an excerpt from the second campaign. You never wondered why the Wreckage is such a grim place. You've always dismissed it with a smirk of superiority and disdain, listening to stories and legends about the origins of the world around you. You knew that only 2 things in life are certain. You're born, and then you die. You plan to die as late as possible. Your ability to seize every opportunity helped with that, and if someone got in your way, it was their problem. You could crush practically anyone like a cockroach, and the sound of breaking bones and the painful cries of those who dared to stand in your way were music to your ears. As for the Wreckage, well, you always claimed that a cunning person like you could find countless opportunities here. From a young age, you believed that you were not meant for the bottom of the food chain, and that you would climb to its very top. After all, someone has to rule, and you never liked following orders. Your mother died in childbirth, or at least that's what some of the lucky ones who lived long enough to turn gray claimed. You didn't feel you lost anything because of it. In fact, you considered it a blessing. From a young age, you had to fight for your own, proving to yourself and others that you were worth something. And that only hardened you. You quickly understood that usually those who are not afraid to get their hands dirty win. And you never had a problem with that. In the depot, that pit you had to exist in, it had been too small for you for a long time. You knew that true opportunities would open closer to the center of the Wreckage, where all kinds of trade flourished. Real deals were made, and for the resourceful, there was always a well-paid job. The time had come to head to Vortex City, a place normal people avoided, but it had always been your destiny. It was time for your song to echo far and wide, to be remembered forever. You can probably tell by now that storytelling is the one thing the game does not seek to be minimal with, and it asks you to pay attention if you want to make it through the campaign alive. While there are a considerable number of things to keep track of, like experience, food management, and action points, the game isn't overly demanding of you in terms of what you need to do. However, your choices and the order in which you make them have a massive impact on the survivability of your situation. A lot of your success will depend on trial and error, and as you play over and over again, you'll unlock dozens of entries in the lore book. These will give you deeper insight into specific factions, enemies, and objects that you encountered. In the process, you'll also be presented with a ton of art that looks to be just as meaningfully crafted as the lore itself. And I have to say, some of the enemy designs in this game are absolutely diabolical, and I think if nothing else, they've done a great job with those. Songs of Rats does a really good job of establishing identity for itself using a limited set of visual elements and a consistent style, which in their art book they explained happened as a result of sketching out each individual asset by hand before adding on details like pixelization, posterization, and color grading in post. And if even half of that is true, then they are already doing a lot more than a lot of lazy devs who are completely outsourcing their design responsibilities to generative AI models, so respect. But back to the aesthetic itself. If you've seen basically any of my other videos, you know that I'm kind of a sucker for this punky, high contrast, two-tone art style. I always find it impressive when devs can use less to describe more, and use shading and thresholding to get a visual point across. That's actually the first thing that ever caught my eye about Songs of Rats, and a self-described goal of the developers here. In the DLC art book for the game, they say, this art style serves a deeper narrative function. It strips away the excess detail while amplifying the emotional weight of the world. Every jagged pixel, every stark shadow contributes to a sense of claustrophobic dread, where the unknown looms just beyond the visible. Now, if I'm being dead-ass honest, they are doing a lot of patting themselves on the back in that description, but I will say that their art style does manage to keep things simple without being boring, and reflects a kind of thoughtfulness that is always much more impressive to me than a barrage of shapes and colors. In addition to being simplistic, the art never takes up too much of the screen. Other than your character portrait and the visual depiction of each scene being written about, there's really not much going on. But it still manages to be captivating because a rich story is being told alongside the visual cues to help your imagination fill in the gaps. In short, this is a very cool text-centric RPG that I think has done a great job of building up its dark and gritty sci-fi world. However, I don't know too much about these devs, and I know that this kind of game might not be everyone's thing, so check out the demo on Steam when you get a chance to see if you feel the same way. Moon River is a 2D puzzle adventure RPG created by Patrick Guillemette, who also goes by Bad Alias. It is a story-focused, atmospheric exploration game developed using RPG Maker, and the earliest version came out in 2024. I originally discovered it on itch.io, but I was pleasantly surprised to find what seems to be the entire game on Steam hidden away behind a demo button. When you start Moon River, you're met with a very peaceful and unassuming menu. You'll hear the first of many songs that this game has to offer, one that puts you at ease, but is also fairly somber and almost wistful. And the moment you hit enter, the serenity stops. We're introduced to our character, a cloaked figure standing in the darkness. You have the freedom to move around the screen as you'd like, but the story only begins when you start to walk east. And that's when you see it. A still beating heart resting on the ground. You kneel to pick it up. You are someone called the Mariner, a sailor who's been out at sea for a long time. You are headed to Elapse Island, one of the last known places of the world. There, it is said that people only exist in moonlight, as well as the river that runs through the island, Moon River. For whatever reason, the Mariner desperately seeks something at the end of the river. Your goal is to find where Moon River ends. As of right now, this is a game you can complete in a single evening, and it's almost structured around your ability to do so. It takes place over the course of 5 unnaturally long and dark hours, as you explore this island's 4 major zones, presumably with the goal of bringing light back to the shadow-riddled island. This is not metaphorical. Doing so requires you to collect bits of pure light in a little box and use them to cast away great walls of shadow. There are things that the game doesn't tell you about this journey that you'll have to glean from context. Opening up the menu, you can learn a little more about the Mariner. There are lots of stats here. A little moon symbol bearing the number 1. A health stat at less than half showing that you're gravely wounded. A kind of energy or stamina meter in even more dire condition betraying how exhausted you are. The Mariner has been through some intense and life-threatening situations, but there's one thing here that isn't even explained: the shaded attribute. In spite of your wounds and your uncertainty, you forge ahead, making your way deeper into the island. As you make your way east, a boy with a bow steps out from the wilderness to block your path. He is native to this island, and he knows at a glance that you are not. The rest of the world, including the place from which you came, has been all but consumed by this great curse, and so he makes the easy assumption that you are the one who brought the shadows here, to a place that used to be a safe haven from the curse that has ravaged every other land on the planet. He says that you are responsible for the shadows which swept in, and, as he says, turned his father into a ghost. And before you can explain yourself, those very same shadows swarm him, tearing him apart, sweeping him away before your eyes. And you see now that this is what the shadows in this world are capable of. This is what they've done to you as well. But instead of completely annihilating you, they have only left you in a sad and mangled state. The darkness is the world itself, the thing that you have to live with and navigate, and which can even feel safe and serene as you pass through these strange lands in the night. But in this new form, it's also a massive existential threat to you and the people you encounter. The shadows have afflicted you with a curse in your time beyond the island. The shaded attribute is a mark of your own run-in with this new and apocalyptic force. And the moon icon from earlier, the one which bears the number 1, is a countdown to the moment you succumb to the curse entirely. You have 1 night left to make it to the end of the river. But the truth is, you're not special. You aren't the only one facing this dread. The entire island sees the shadows encroaching, and they know that the end of the world has finally made it to their doorstep. Marching through grasslands, forests, deserts, and swamps, you'll have to work with and around many people who are now scrambling to escape the fate that, mere days before, seemed like superstition. People here are afraid to die, or more accurately, they're afraid of being torn apart in what seems to be the unraveling of reality itself. But the lengths people go to escape this only seem to grow more absurd and desperate as you travel. An hour to the east, you find astronomers searching for a solution to the end of days in the sky. An entire guild of people trying to calculate, divine, or engineer their way out of it. 2 hours from where you started, cultists are eating seeds and planting their feet in the earth, turning themselves into trees in the red moonlight of the desert. And a 3rd hour beyond this, people are praying to strange inhuman gods, hoping for some kind of deific salvation, even if it's not the one that they were promised. One nowhere to be seen. By the end of the story, you yourself become a vessel for more light than can be found anywhere else in the world. And still, it turns out to be a far cry from what the mariner is actually searching for, from what actually lies at the end of Moon River. I won't tell you what's there, but I will say that Moon River is a story that ultimately asks you to consider what it means to face your own mortality. It asks you to consider the difference between death and annihilation, the difference between remembrance and legacy, and why it's so important for us to properly frame all of our suffering and joy within those spaces, rather than try to assert control over all of those ideas individually. All the while, Moon River makes room for the strange, the absurd, the surreal, the silly even, and I think that's what makes it feel so brilliantly executed. Needless to say, Moon River has resonated with me in a way that is unlike anything I've played in a really long time, and I think it might be my favorite game on today's list. I'll be honest with you, I almost didn't want to share this. I wanted to keep it all to myself. Because as I was playing through it, and I kept hearing more and seeing more, I realized I found a little gem, a true treasure, something meaningful and authentic and imperfect in a digital world where everything is starting to feel fake and forced. Moon River almost feels personal, like a letter from Guillemette to the world about life, death, pain, the struggle of finding meaning through it all. And it almost feels untouched by the wider internet. Something which hasn't had the life sucked out of it by rabid fandoms and consumer culture and memification the way things like this sometimes do. I don't want this game to become another lifeless trend for people to pick up and tack onto their identity, but I'm not blind to the fact that I might be opening up exactly that can of worms by trying to bring attention to it. Still, I realize that trying to keep that from happening would be selfish of me and unfair to a dev that clearly poured his heart into this project and deserves to be acknowledged for it. It's unfair to you, who should know about this and play it and can do so right now. I'm going to be watching this dev with great interest, but for now, I hope you try this game when you get a chance. I don't think you'll regret it. Before we move on to the next game, I need you to listen to me very closely. I have to warn you that something is going to change from this point forward in the video. You should know that I'm not doing the spooky voice anymore. You've gotten 20 minutes of it out of me, okay? This is not a cadaver marathon.
At this stage, I had a really bad feeling.
Shout out to Cadaver.
The whole thing wasn't right. It's hard to explain, but it had to be something weird.
But this ain't Cadaver.
I was really anxious.
We're not doing deep dives and spooky icebergs. Okay, we're doing video games. It's time to start acting like it. Ah yes, Bleak Sword. This game got me through some trying times. If you've heard of Devolver Digital, you've probably heard of this one. Developed by More 8-Bit, it first came out in 2019, but a deluxe version re-released in 2023, and that is when I found out about it. It is a game where you play a little featureless dude who is on a quest to obtain and destroy a cursed weapon, known as the Bleak Sword. This game relies on a trippy little blend of 2D sprites and 3D environments, creating something that is unlike most other RPGs on the market, especially in the indie scene. Most of what you're supposed to be paying attention to is fairly muted. You get these sort of blank white sprites. Whereas the rest of the world, the environments and cutscenes and the occasional boss, they are all more detailed and visually striking and seek to establish the mood. So this game is minimalist in its execution and base visual style, But when you boot it up for the first time, you'll get a horrible barrage of visual effects, including bloom, chromatic aberration, depth of field warping. Just do yourself a favor and turn all of that shit off immediately, because the game is visually overwhelming enough as it is. It will often use high contrast and bright flashes to create a visual effect like fire or lightning. And in fact, the game will actually weaponize this against you in later levels, blinding you in the middle of battle with frequent second-long flashes that block you from seeing what the enemy is doing and how they're moving. It is very messed up. Do not play this if you have epilepsy or have even had a migraine in the past year, because you'll have a seizure and the game will take advantage of the AFK moment and whoop your ass while you're trying not to die in real life. It is that ruthless. But really, that's just the salt in the wounds. The gameplay centers on this beat-em-up style round-based combat. And it's Souls-inspired, clearly, but calling it a Souls-like is a bit of a stretch. It sort of blends a forgiving, shoot-until-you-make-it approach to wins and losses, with the catch that losing twice in a row wipes out all of the experience you've put toward leveling up your character, and permanently takes away any items you may have found along the way. So if you're stuck using the Souls-like terminology to describe any and every game, you could say that Bleak Sword is more of an introduction to, or maybe even a reprieve from, Souls-like mechanics, and it's no more punishing than what you'd find approaching an arcade machine with a pocket full of quarters. Combat itself is fairly straightforward. In simple terms, you can attack, dodge, and roll. Those are the three things you can do, limited only by your stamina and timing ability. You get light attacks, heavy attacks, a shield, dodge roll, roll attack, and that's pretty much it. It's your job to use all of these to get past about a dozen levels of minions at a time before facing each zone's final boss. Usually this is some kind of a bigger version of an enemy you've already encountered, or a foreshadowing of a new enemy type that you'll encounter later. The game will often do this interesting little thing where it will sprinkle in a new enemy type every level or two between rounds of familiar enemies spawning in. This, strangely, adds to the difficulty in a way that I never anticipated, because it immediately breaks your immersion and yanks you out of a rhythm that you've developed, and then throws you right back in the rhythm. And that is usually enough on your first playthrough to give you this crazy impression of difficulty that is more of an illusion, meant to scare off impatient or easily challenged players, rather than any actually meaningful difficulty curve. For reference, think about that big-ass tutorial level ship from Armored Core 6 that ended up actually being the hardest thing in the game. Bleak Sword is playing the same kind of mind game with you. In order to get past this, you have to let the game teach you early on to rely on muscle memory and audio-visual cues to learn the dance you have to dance with each specific kind of enemy. At that point, the real challenge will be to juggle them wisely as 2 or even 3 different kinds of monsters are dropped onto the screen to fight you. You're probably like, Brian, this segment of the video has gone on for way too long. You're yapping, you're blathering. You have never talked about a game like this before, and frankly, it's no longer entertaining. And there is a reason for that, and that is, first of all, because I'm not trying to entertain you. This is an expression of my pain. I've played through this game like 4 times already, all on the Steam Deck, by the way. It was basically all I played for 1-2 month stretch of my life when I felt stuck and didn't have anything else to do with my evenings. And thing number 2 is I never unlocked every achievement in this game because I eventually got out of that rut, and even when I was in it, I had responsibilities and a social life, but I did collect a hearty number of shiny patches to prove that I had done my time. For instance, there are several that you get for killing bosses without taking any hits. There are some for participating in the deluxe version's arena feature, and so on. But there is one achievement that has eluded me this entire time, and that is the No Life Steam achievement, which requires you to complete the game without ever upgrading your health from the base amount that you start with. This is as difficult as it sounds, considering enemies get much tougher as you go. And it isn't the rarest achievement in the game. In fact, I'd already unlocked the No Defense achievement before starting this video, which is even rarer. But this isn't about the rarity. This isn't about getting every achievement and being a completionist. No, this is because No Life has been almost mocking me for years now. Been sitting right there, all unachieved, basically telling me that I wasn't really a no-life gamer. I was just like all of the rest of the Bleak Sword players. Unremarkable, unaccomplished. A man without qualities. Someone who couldn't even get a little heart-shaped badge in a video game he's played through multiple times. It was calling me soft. It was calling me a life hacker. So I decided, while probably introducing this game to many of you, that it was time to make my return. I needed to show Devolver who they were dealing with. I needed to remind more 8-Bit that I could return to their game at any time and platinum that ass whenever I so choose. But I spare it, out of kindness and respect for the other time-intensive things in my life, like bills and sleep, healthy relationships, and good hygiene. Well, all of that is over now. We're not doing that anymore. The era of kindness is over. Now, it's time to have no life. There you go. I did it. I'm done with this game now. That's all I wanted. In all seriousness, I'm glad I came back to this game. I think Bleak Sword's ability to bring a player like me back over and over again is indicative of how good it actually is. I don't like to replay stuff, but I had just as much fun this go around as I did, 2 years ago. It really felt like somebody was in the development studio constantly considering what the most fun part of an RPG really was. It wasn't complex character designs, it wasn't entangled narratives, it wasn't super punishing roguelike experiences or a strict adherence to formulaic Souls-like mechanics. It wasn't any of that. It wasn't even color. You didn't even need color. There are 3 colors in this game, and 2 of them are black and white. Fundamentally, it was just about having a fast-paced, rewarding, and achievable experience that anybody can pick up in a moment's notice. It's being the kid at the arcade with a pocket full of quarters, just ready to go. That's what it's all about, and I feel like this game perfectly encapsulates that. Rogue FP. This is a game that I threw in the background of my channel intro months ago, just as sort of visual filler while I was talking, and I've been looking for an opportunity to give it real time in the spotlight since. Back in my video on Demon Lord Reincarnation, which is something that could also fit on this list, so please feel free to check it out, I ruffled a few feathers when I said, "This is not a Souls-like. This is not a roguelike." Wow, very good, you guys got it. Because some of you guys picked up on the fact that permadeath is a big component of roguelike games, and Demon Lord has that. And others of you don't really know what rogue is, but this seems to fit the mold of the other things you've played. And you thought you were going to teach me something about Demon Lord even though I spent 40 hours in that goddamn labyrinth before you even knew it existed. And you know what? While I'm picking fights, some of you are just like,
I'm 53 years old and I played Wizardry when it first came out. That's all this is. You whippersnappers aren't doing anything new.
But opinions of OG Dig Dug players aside, your disgruntled responses are understandable. Rogue is old. Real Triassic era stuff, just like Wizardry and the people who played it. It existed well before I and a lot of you were born. And while you can make the argument that this or that is a roguelike because X or Y, I think it's just more instructive to actually show you all what a first-person 3D game modeled on the original Rogue formula actually looks like today. Rogue FP is as faithful of a modern interpretation as you can get of the original Rogue game from 1980. It's Rogue for the Minecraft generation, or generations at this point, complete with ugly pixelated textures and a world you can move through and look around at your leisure. It is a game that has almost all of the hallmarks of the OG title. You have a combat system that doesn't require you to switch to a different mode, you have a procedurally generated dungeon with a new structure and new items every run, and it has a single-player character who is not beholden to overly mechanical, rigid, or complex turn-based systems, like the ones we get out of a lot of party-based DRPGs and JRPGs today. All of these things make Rogue FP the roguelike. It is very loyal to something called the Berlin interpretation, and that is a standard that has been used for decades to figure out what actually falls into the roguelike category. It was used long before Steam just decided to tack the tag onto whatever vaguely, maybe kind of looks like an RPG in the big old Borgesian fuck pile that is its store. But the reason I wanted to throw the game in this list is because of the liberties that it takes, namely in its modern reinterpretation of the visual minimalism that resulted from the graphical and processing limitations of Rogue's time. More to the point, Rogue was an ASCII game. It built up its entire world in numbers, letters, and symbolic blocks. And you'll see an homage to that when you first boot Rogue FP up. It presents us with a visual style that is a hybrid between textures like brick and cobblestone and wood on doors, and jumbles of letters meant to act as a kind of mosaic shading. Now, frankly, I hate this. I think it's too visually overwhelming to be digestible at all. But the good news is that it's only one of 3 options that you have for lenses to view this world through. The second one just cuts the letters out entirely, giving you sensible textures to work with. It makes the game look like the indie RPG that it is. If you come across an orc, you'll see an orc. If you stab a bat or a hobgoblin, you'll see a little pixel art image to match. But things get really interesting when you switch to the third art style. This option completely removes all textures and replaces every tile you come across with a giant black and white character in the ASCII set. The enemies you come across usually take the first letter of their name as the thing to represent them. An orc, like the one we just came across earlier, will be a giant O. A rattlesnake will be a big R. And if you come across a leprechaun, you'll find a big L, especially after he shivs you, steals some of your money, and disappears. I was pretty captivated by this when I first found it, because not only does it really serve its purpose in paying respect to the classic, older-style Unix-based terminal games, but it almost looks futuristic, as if you're walking through some kind of sci-fi spaceship dungeon crawler. It takes an older concept and reinvents it for a completely new and intriguing experience, and I think that's something that can be hard for a game to do well, but I'm always excited for something to pull it off like this. So, I think if you're interested in getting a very basic Rogue 101 lesson, this remake is a great way to broaden your understanding of the subgenre. It's also just a super chill dungeon crawling experience. A huge shout out to the dev, Jurax Games, for putting a modern spin on an eternal classic. That's it. That's the video. You may click off the page now. Okay, are the new people gone yet? The rest of this video is going to be for the people who've been here, so if you're not already subscribed, you're not going to know what the hell I'm talking about. I wanted to cap off the video by giving you guys an update on my months-long dive into the Grave Robber Foundation bundle. I have been playing a lot of Das Geisterschiff, which is one of 3 mech-themed dungeon crawlers in the bundle, with a ton of interesting world building and lore that could fit here, but deserve their own video at some point. You can find a bit of my gameplay and initial reactions to it in the archive via Blue Sky. Dragon Ruins is another series in that bundle that I wanted to make a mention of here. It describes itself as a dungeon crawling microgame for tired people, and that tracks. It relies on a lot of mechanics that make it a perfect fit for this list: an auto-battler mechanic, limited leveling systems, and non-permadeath loss. And it's probably going to look familiar to you if you've watched or experienced Demon Lord Reincarnation's gameplay, because it reuses a lot of the same assets that did, from character models to sound effects. It even takes place in the same setting, the fictional land of Issaquah. And I kind of love that they're doing this world building over the course of several mostly narratively unrelated games, and it makes me wonder how much of this reuse and experimentation is the developer trying to figure out how to make the masterpiece that he wants to make. I really respect that somebody would be willing to put everything out on the table that they've made so far to show the iterative development of an idea both story and gameplay wise. But at least with the first game in the Dragon Ruin series, this is not the masterpiece. This isn't it. But a newly announced upcoming game by the Grave Robber Foundation could be that masterpiece. It is another DRPG, yes, I know, another DRPG, by the name of Morituria. Now, Morituria feels like the dark minimalist game this list is missing. You play a mercenary given the job of returning a stolen artifact to its rightful place in a dungeon. The inverted rogue storyline and wireframe graphics are really appealing to me as someone who's spent a lot of time playing bare-bones games, and who sees the potential that this dev has to make something worth talking about for like 45 minutes. Romanisert, the lead dev, has been posting updates and gameplay videos on his Blue Sky page, and it's been exciting to track that. I am watching its development very closely and critically. Now, the first of their games that I've played was great, but this is not the Grave Robber Foundation channel, and if it turns out to be a massive disappointment, I will roast that shit from the inside out. I'm just saying. This is a PSA that goes for all devs. I'm not sponsored by anyone, and I'm not trying to do anyone any favors. I pay for these games myself, out of pocket, with no other goal than to support small creators and talk about their work. It's all my real opinion. No, I don't want your free Steam codes to test your thing out, and none of you are immune to honest feedback, so you better be prepared to eat a little shit on your way to chasing glory, if only because it's a sign that I respect what you do, and I expect you to as well. That is all of the video game rambling you get for today. Sorry for the long gap between videos. There are actually a lot that I finished recording and editing since the last time most of you guys heard from me. A couple of them are playthroughs in the archive, which you can find a link to over on Blue Sky. One of them I'm just sitting on due to copyright concerns, and many others are just in script and footage form, ready to be assembled, but I haven't quite had the time to get to those yet. In any case, thank you all for hanging out. Oh, and by the way, I have good news. Since you've made it to the end of the video, I'm sure you're one of the people who actually cares about this. Blue Sky has an account-specific notification feature now, so even if you hate that platform and don't want to spend any time on it, you can still follow me over there and get a ping whenever I post a video to the secret archives, or just have something dumb to say, since so many of you are interested in that, for some reason. Either way, no hard feelings, and I need to get back into the rhythm of posting over there anyway, so just know I've got my ear to the ground and you are all appreciated. Thank you again. I'll catch you guys in the next one. There are almost 10,000 of you right now. We're really doing this, huh? Okay.